Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Mike Force podcast. So, got a special guest for you today, and it's about something I reported on almost 2 weeks ago. I did a story on Mike Glover channel, which I'll link that actual video down below, on a green beret that I found out was in my backyard, like nearly my backyard. I could see the neighborhood from here, that was involved in a mental health crisis. He ended up getting in a high-speed pursuit. A 55-year-old man that served honorably as a Green Beret in 5th Special Forces Group, has 5 combat rotations to Iraq and Afghanistan in the early parts of the global war on terror, has a degree in geology from Florida State University, impeccable career, selfless service, loyalty, duty to our nation, and served and put it all on the line. Well, you get out, you transition, and you look for help because you have some issues. He got no help. He got no help from VA. Not just not getting help, but he got denied the help that he needed. In crisis, calling the hotlines, doing all the right things, trying to seek out help, even trying to get help from nonprofits. And you know what they told him? You're too belligerent, you're too broken, we can't fix you. We can't help you. And so they didn't. So he goes through this. His wife is on the B team, helping him through all of this stuff by supporting him emotionally, physically, and working through the justice system and trying to get him help. And you know what Wasatch County does here in Utah? They just put him in solitary confinement. That's all they did. Because you see, there is no program to help people who are suffering from mental health crisis, especially our veterans. So if you're suffering from a mental health crisis and you conduct any crime, you're a criminal. You're not a veteran who needs help because the cancer is what's causing the symptoms. We're putting Band-Aids on hatchet wounds, but nobody wants to address the hatchet wound because it's too messy. So what does Wasatch County do? The local sheriff's department do? They toss them in a cell. Now, I'm not blaming the local sheriffs because I know the deputies in this county, and they're good officers. There's many good officers. Leadership, nah, but the officers are good officers. They're out there hitting the streets every day, keeping this community safe. The biggest problem is the justice system. I just heard a story about Erick's first hearing with the judge that I mentioned in that story that's linked down below, and it was a nightmare, complete fallout. You see, there's no protocol. Well, actually, there is a protocol. There is a protocol that's mental health related to get people who are suffering from crisis in the jail, in the prison system, to get them help. But Wasatch County isn't following that protocol. Most of the nation isn't. Because if you're a criminal, you're just a criminal. You realize that if you're a felon in jail and you're a veteran that served this country honorably and sacrificed everything when your career field in your profession, when your record was impeccable, you realize that they take away your VA benefits? That's right. They take away everything. As a convicted felon, you have no rights anymore. And you have no benefits for serving this nation. What other professions do they do that? You get a DUI. You get a arrest record as a doctor, a lawyer, anything, any profession, name it. Do they take away your benefits? No, they don't. But if you're a veteran suffering from mental health crisis, if you have been diagnosed with TBI, post-traumatic stress, physical ailments with chronic pain, you get no help. Erick's wife has been his B team. Erick went to the VA with his wife, and they said, we'll get to you when we get to you. And they said it'll be 60 days. Well, ironically, when they contacted him and said, hey, we're willing to help now, it was too late. He was already in jail. So it's a broken county. It's a broken town. It's a broken state. And most certainly, it's a broken nation when it comes to helping our veterans out. I wanted to tell the story from a wife's perspective. That's often not communicated through. That story isn't being told. So while Erick's in jail, I did a part 1 of this podcast with his wife to get the ground truth. A judge will judge. A cop will arrest. They deal with criminals every single day. But what they're not addressing is people that are suffering from mental health issues, especially our veterans. So without further ado, let's kick off the podcast. All right. So I did a video last week or this week over the weekend. I felt compelled. I'd never do videos on the weekend. And I felt compelled because I read Erick's story and it was on this local news break app. And I rarely see articles that actually paint the correct picture, even if it's got inaccuracies, at least advocate for a veteran or somebody who's kind of going through it. You typically never see that. And because it's a big gamble, it's a big risk for the journalist, the organization. I could never imagine seeing KSL, for example, drop an article like that. And if they did, it'd be really compelling. And the article was on your husband and the situation that you guys had from June 2nd, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I thought about you because I was like, okay, you're in a situation that's very difficult, but and your husband is in a jail cell in solitary confinement, but this isn't the first time. You've been dealing with this. You have years of dealing with this and being an advocate for your husband and him trying to get help. And so let's start from the beginning because we're going to couple part this series. Let's start in the beginning. Like, how did you and Erick meet? And then give us some context about how you discovered his background as a Green Beret.
Okay, so I've known Erick since I was 8 years old. We lived across the street from each other, and he was one of my brother's best friends. And so just grew up together, as teenagers. Our hometown is Auburndale, Florida, and it's about the same size as Heber, where we live now. And after high school, he went to Florida State. I went to USF, and we just kind of went our own ways. Erick went to the military. He was a lieutenant in the Army, came out. I did my things. I worked in DC. I worked on various different projects here and there. Worked in education, worked for the state with Florida, writing programs, everything else. So everything that I've ever worked, I would say, in any industry I've been in has always been about like reform of some sort. I take something that's broken and I fix it. And so I was married 28 years and I just divorced and I was living in Atlanta. I was by myself and was never on Facebook ever. I was never about social media. So a girlfriend of mine said, get on Facebook. So I get on Facebook. I was the fourth person to friend me. And then the next thing you know, I get this message. He's like, hey, I'm dating a girl from Atlanta. We're coming to town, visit. I'd love to see you. And that's what happened, right? He came to visit me. And almost immediately I could see issues, I could see, and he would tell me too, he would say, friend, I'm really messed up from the war. I've got these issues.
So he was vocal about
He
it
was
from the
very
onset.
vocal. He was very, very vocal. And he was like, I would rather just go sit in a hole on the beach and just, die that way. And then he started opening up to me a little bit more about, previous relationships. He was married during the wartime to a Hungarian, somebody that he gave citizenship to. And, she was in law enforcement, but he just didn't feel that the reason they divorced is because he didn't feel like it was fair to continue to expose her to this. He knew he was messed up. Law enforcement, even in Florida, constantly were dealing with him for climbing on the roof thinking, people are coming to get him, or in the woods, just mental health things. And it was just never addressed. And so when he came to Atlanta, I started just seeing issues, and then he became combative and it was difficult. It became difficult. And at that point, I realized that here and there he was using various forms of different drugs. And I don't mean street drugs. So we've talked about this before. Nurses don't, just because you say they're addicted to something doesn't mean that it's street drugs. It's something they can get in the clinic, et cetera. Just like alcohol, you can go buy it. But what happened is the VA had prescribed him Adderall, which is used for ADHD,
Mm.
and that is a form of methamphetamines. So when you read the article and it says meth, you think automatically, your crackheads or whatever that are down on the street. But his was more pill format, but he would overtake them because the speed that he needed was that of what he was when he was special forces. He had 4 back surgeries, that limited his mobility. He had different things that impacted him, but I saw that there was a problem. And then eventually law enforcement was involved. And it wasn't just me, it was other people calling, that they're showing up trying to deal with this veteran that's losing it, in the community. And I got to know the guys in Cobb County pretty well. And we had a place in Atlanta, Georgia, and Nashville, and started utilizing the VA system, and that was when I discovered that they were breaking promises. Everything that they claimed to do for veterans, it was all a lie. And I started really looking at that, saying, wait a minute, questioning them on it. Because the career where I was in was always, you always ask questions, why aren't you doing this? Why don't we have a referral? Why? And then on the flip side of that, Erick would always deny his use. He would tell me he was using, but then he would deny it later. There was displacement of saying, this is all your fault and everything else. And my heart would break because I realized then he's got such trauma from the war. He's trying to just, hide all these things. And when he started saying he should have died at war and that he could have done more, I realized then that Erick suffered tremendously from moral injury. And, Erick's more than just a husband. He's a friend of mine. And your motto is you never leave anyone behind. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I had to advocate for him because no one else was. Even our nation, our own nation was not. So that's just kind of it in a nutshell quickly, how we got to where we are now. And people ask me, how did we end up in Utah? Well, because we were in Georgia, they did nothing for him, including law enforcement. Nashville, same exact thing. Alabama, same exact thing. And then Utah. And then you read his story, right? And this is at the very high level. And it went on. It's been going on since February. You read the 3 different situations where the first one, they charge him with kidnapping because he was blocking the driveway and there's snow on the ground, 3 foot of snow on the ground, where we were at on the mountain. And then the second one was he was trying to commit suicide. And the week prior to that, he went to the VA and said, I need help. And they turned him away. And then here we are on the high speed chase. So, in a nutshell, like I said, when he walked back into my life in 2000, it was immediately, oh my gosh, my friend needs help. But um, we're hoping that his story can take it to the next level to where there's total exposure to say there's really a problem with these guys that come out of the military. They need help and they're not getting help at all.
Yeah, he's a pretty extreme case because there's elements of addiction, there's elements of criminology now. He's got a criminal history and record. There's a whole bunch of elements that all tie back to the source, which is he's dealing with a mental health crisis that he can't get addressed. Who was Erick before all of this took place? And a lot of people don't understand like this idea of like a man serving his country selflessly for years, doing multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, being recommended for the Bronze Star, like all this high speed, squared away stuff, and then all of a sudden he becomes a criminal career, like a career criminal,
Right.
That's has a pattern of this. What's the Erick that you remember?
Oh, he was just always so full of life. It's amazing. Just in the last few days, when I went viral, I just threw this article out there. I didn't care anymore. I was like, I want everyone to know the truth, and if they judge, they judge. But I feel like the majority of people are going to show compassion because they understand what's going on with our vets. They understand what we're seeing, the high rate of suicide every single day. So something's telling me in my heart, I'm a woman of faith, you've got to tell this story. Don't be ashamed of this story because it's got to be told. And so when I put it out there, the people from our hometown, like I said, we're the size of Heber City, where we're sitting right now, the amount of support from people was incredible. They're like, Erick was such a great guy, high school, and we're praying for him. So they tell the story. It's not just me as a wife sitting here trying to explain to Heber City or the judicial system or law enforcement, he was a good guy before war. These are people that can validate that. And it is post after post after post saying he was great. He was just a great guy. He was a good guy. And he was always laughing. He was always joking. He was very intelligent. He had a choice to go between Florida State or go to Gainesville, to be a Gator. And he went Florida State, and he was a geologist. And then he was, a lieutenant. You know what that takes to go in as an officer into the military. And so when you ask me what happened, his identity was taken away from him. So when Erick, was no longer in the military, he no longer had that identity of his Green Beret. He no longer had that team that he was on, because you understand as a Green Beret yourself, there was always a team. You always had an entire support system. You had each other's backs. Now all of a sudden he's isolated with no one around him. Everyone's judging him, and he's looking around to figure out who he is. The military is so embedded in his brain that anytime we go on a base, whether it's Fort Campbell, whether it's Stewart, whatever it is, he follows the rules, which is crazy to me. It's almost like something clicks in his brain that says, don't go past the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Okay. At 5 o'clock, what happens? You get out of your car, you salute the flag, even the children, everyone stops. There are rules. In society, there are no rules for him. And this is not a society that he even recognizes anymore, right? When he left to go into the military, it was in the 90s. Look how much things have changed. He comes out and he's watching an administration that has wrecked the reputation of America, what he fought for. When the Biden administration pulled out of Afghanistan, the first thing in his mind was, all of my friends that died for nothing. He's screaming, my interpreters are dead, right? He's pulling TVs off the wall. So that was the first thing, right? So now he's looking at a country that's just collapsing, that's folding in right around him, that he has zero control over. He sees Israel get attacked October 7th. He sees the women on TV showing them with blood on them, blood on their pants. He knows, he's reliving this, and he's screaming, they've broken these women in half. He has seen that in person. You and I have had conversations about that, the flashbacks that he has. And then, Trump gets shot. So he sees where this country has gone, where he sees that an administration allows for pro-Hamas supporters to be at our veteran facilities where he's supposed to go for treatment, and all he sees are war flags. So he doesn't recognize the society that he has come back to from war. Over there, it was expected, right? He's in enemy territory. But then he comes here and he's thinking, okay, this is the America I know. This is my family. This is hometown Auburndale. No, it's not. It's something he doesn't recognize. And the judgment that people project onto guys like Erick, military, there's automatic judgment. Oh, they're veteran. They're bad.
They're broken.
They're broken. They're broken. So I say that the core of that is his identity was taken away. Then he has all of this trauma that he was exposed to, and now he has nothing but time to think about it, time to miss Sergeant Major Stacks, time to relive when he's pulled off the helicopter and 5 minutes later he watches that same helicopter get shot out of the sky. Or he's pulled off of the convoy and he's the weapons guy, the 18 Bravo, and so he's told he's got to stay back to get this delivery. And 5 minutes later, he hears on the radio that every one of them were ambushed and he's got to go recover bodies. Or he has a target he has to shoot and there are casualties, right? Collateral damage of casualties. And he knows, these are women, these are children. These are not war stories that people want to talk about, but it's reality. He has to live with that. That's called moral injury because he is a Christian man. He believes in God and he feels like he's going to hell because of the things that he's done. When I say to him, you wore that uniform, you wore that flag, you did exactly what your country asked you to do, but yet our country has turned their backs on him and millions of others. President Trump says all the time we went from 22 suicides a day to 44 suicides a day. Why? Because there's so much of that. We don't rehabilitate our military like we're supposed to. I told you that last year when I was in Israel, I met with IDF and I met with different ones and I was trying to figure out what are they doing, right? Because they've never had to go to war like this before. They're just now building a VA system. What are they doing? Their guys come straight out of the battlefield, or out of combat, and they go straight into a rehab center for 90 days. They don't see the public. They don't go home to their families because they don't want them to kill their families, right? Because Erick had team guys that there was one that came home and killed his whole family. His flashbacks were so bad. And that sits with him as then, is that dark wolf going to come out on me one day? Am I going to do the same thing? And so, again, I mentioned to you, Erick's more than just a husband. He's my friend. And I look at him and I'm like, he needs help. And your motto is you never leave anyone behind. And that's how I feel. He's been left behind. And so many others have been left behind. And I feel it's so important to address the, losing the identity, what he used to be, right? And coming back to a society that he truly does not recognize anymore, that's judgy, that law enforcement doesn't know what to do with him. That they go, well, you broke the law, therefore I'm going to handcuff you and I'm going to go put you in jail. Oh, not only am I going to put you in jail, but you're going to solitary confinement because you're an animal now. And I think that's what bothers me the most is they don't see his true soul. They don't see this good man that's in there and that he's carrying all this baggage around. And in the studies that I've looked at, and also my own healing process of going through trauma, is one of the things that I've learned through brain education is this: imagine all of that trauma that you have experienced your entire life being in a bag. And if you get up to go get a drink of water, you got to grab that bag and you got to drag that bag with you. If you're going to the restroom, wherever you go, you're not just getting up freely to go there. There's that trauma that sits inside there. It's weighing on you every single breath you take, every second of the day. So how do we help that soldier heal? Right? So it's through brain education. It's through retraining the brain. It's through finding self-worth, because all of that's gone. He chose not to have a family when he was growing up because he saw what was happening. He went to the funerals of SF guys. He watched the wives. He watched the children. And he goes, I don't ever want to put a family through that, And he does have a son, who's a Marine now, but you just don't understand what's going through their mind. And so that's the best way that I can, explain that to everyone from my own perception, from just observing what I've seen, where his pains are, where his trauma is. I just feel like he lost his identity, and that's been a struggle for him.
Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, most, even sister services, the Air Force sends their guys and gals to like Spain for R&R before they go back home. I've been on operations and 12 hours later, the minimal time. I mean, that's like C-17, air refueling, landing back at Pope Air Force Base, and I'm at a grocery store 12 hours later. I just was involved in a significant combat operation, almost getting blown out of the sky in a Mi-17 in this particular case, a Russian helicopter, ironically, and come home and I'm at a grocery store and there's no transitional period. It's immediately getting sent back. I mean, sent back home, but also put in my, at the time, family's house where I'm an animal. I mean, I was just operating off of primal instincts for most of the deployments that was on. And now I'm inside of a home trying to be a lapdog. I was a dog of war, biting bad guys. And now I'm sitting here on somebody's lap getting petted. And I don't like that too much. And then there's no transitional things that the military does for veterans like your husband. I mean, if you look at special operations, the very small percentage of the population, I always say veterans are not created equal. They're created equal in their service and their selfless service at that, but they're not created equal in what they're actually doing in their profession. And so one guy's dilemma could be the one convoy movement he did where they hit an IED. And that's a significant traumatic act or incident that took place that changed his life forever. and he gets the same treatment as somebody who's been conditionally stressed, conditionally traumatized, sustained trauma for a 10, 20-year period.
Mhm.
And it's like, those are two different animals. They're two different problems with two different resolutions. And I think one of the major issues is you were talking about VA and how they're dealing with a lot. I mean, they're overtaxed. They don't have enough resources, and they have a lot of incompetent people. I've met those incompetent people
Mhm.
over the course of my own drama with veteran affairs. What are some of the challenges that you faced when you started to seek help? Like you go to VA, you try to set appointments, you try to talk to somebody. What were some of the obstacles that you ran into? And what were you able to do to navigate that system to get some type of care for your husband, if any?
I would say the referral system, because as you know, it's like you have to make an appointment to go get a referral, to make another appointment to go get another referral, to make another appointment to go get another
So
referral.
wild.
It is.
It's so
And
great.
I didn't believe it, in the beginning because I always had, private insurance, United Healthcare. And I'm like, oh, I make a phone call to my doctor and he gets me right in. What do you mean? They got to get a referral. And so when I got involved, I'm like, what? How is this a delay? So when he was in Nashville, he was supposed to go to, he ended up in the hospital for about 10 days, and we were trying to get him a treatment center. It's called the Ranch, right? They talk about that in the paper, in the article. And I have text messages from one of the psych nurses, and she's like, oh, it's a lot of red tape. It's going to take us a while. I'm like, I need it now. How hard is it to sign this referral, to get Eric to go to this ranch? And here we are, 10 days he's been in the hospital. The psychiatrist doesn't want to let him out because he's like, he needs care. And so we're going to let him out again. And guess what? The same cycle starts over again. Nothing. We go to Alabama. I've got a video. I think I shared this with you where they say, in order to get this referral, we need you to fax or mail. And I'm like, wait a minute, fax or mail? That's like old. What happened to
Who
email?
has a fax machine
Right.
anymore?
And then you want snail mail? I'm thinking this is going to take 8 days to get there. And you're telling me on this piece of paper that I need to call back in 45 days just to see if you received it. I'm a little confused here. You're really telling me that this day and time of technology, that I can walk around with a cell phone in my hand and Google Maps has me in its location, precise location, from point A to point B. And it's telling me that if I drive from point A to point B, which is Salt Lake City, VA, it's going to take me 58 minutes and it's X amount of miles. This is a satellite tracking this. If you have that kind of technology, why are we using a fax machine and we don't have something that just transmits straight over to the VA that says, hey, here's the paperwork, open the email and go, yep, we're going to check it off. No. It's so antiquated. It's so old school. One system doesn't talk to the other, obviously.
No.
You were saying frustrations when I've talked to the people at the Green Beret Foundation, or I've talked to different ones at various locations of the VA system in the different states. It's all the same. So I'm handed a piece of paper that says call back in 45 days. So I said to Eric, let's just drive over to Birmingham. Let's just drive over to there. We're just going to walk in. So we do. It's an hour and a half away. So I walk in. This little old fella hands me a piece of paper and says, call the number. And I go, oh my gosh, really?
I'm
Call
here,
what?
and
No,
you
I'm
want me to
here.
call the
You want me to
number?
call the number? And I'm like, okay. So I walk out. Eric's sitting in the car. I call the number and I went, oh my God, Eric, hand me your phone. So Eric hands me his phone. I take my phone, I video me calling this number. And I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I look at him. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. It's October 31st. It was Halloween. And it says, thank you for calling the VA. We're just now opening mail May 20th. I have it on video. Look at the distance.
It's October, and they're
Yes.
saying next spring we can get to you. That's
We're
when we
just
start.
now opening mail May 20th. And I'm
Wow.
like, you've got to be kidding me. Who is listening? So I went to Tuberville, senator. And I'm like, this is a problem, blah, blah, blah. I get an email back and, he seems like a nice guy and everything, but I'm non-political in that sense, right? Don't tell me that you're a senator. Don't tell me you're a congressman. Do something, act, right? You've been elected to do something. And I get this generic email that says, thank you for your email. Thank you for being a constituent, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we do a lot for our veterans. The same thing when he was in Nashville, Tennessee. I emailed Blackburn. She says, I'm an advocate for VA. Then listen to me. If you're an advocate, then call me and go, why is this veteran in my district being treated so poorly?
And they wouldn't even
Silent.
have that conversation.
Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. I get to Utah. We move here January 28th. And I will say this about Senator Curtis. I call his office and say, I want to talk to you about the VA system. This is the experience I've had. They had me in on February 10th. Guess what? Guess who got arrested February 11th? Erick. The same day I went in is the same night he was arrested for thinking we were in Afghanistan. Flashbacks.
Wow.
Okay. So again, I'm emailing them again. I'm emailing Barry over at Senator Curtis's office saying, well, interesting. We just had the conversation about how law enforcement treats our veterans, saying we've got to change this because this is what I've experienced in other states. Why are we not implementing CIT training, which is crisis intervention training, where they have somebody that's a social worker that law enforcement calls in and says, we need to analyze this guy. He needs to go to the psych ward over here because he's having a mental health issue.
Is that because the status quo now is a cop shows up, someone's going to jail, versus a police officer showing up to maintain and protect the public, but intervene and give this person help that they need, not the jail cell they don't need.
Correct. And that was my advocacy, right? So this is before anything happened here in Utah. I went and said, this is the problem. It's a systematic problem. We've got to address it. He goes, I agree 100%. And he also said, we talked about the benefits. This is before Erick went to jail. I was griping about, because in my book I write about there's 180,000 men and women that served in combat that are sitting in jail. The second they go to jail, they lose their benefits, right? After 60 days for felony. And you have people responding online saying, well, if they committed a crime, they should go, well, this is not a crime. This is a mental health crisis because they did go to war. Just like you said, you were an animal at war, but then you got to come back and be the lapdog. That makes all the sense in the world. No one wants to treat that. Instead, they go, oh, he broke the law. He sped. He did this. How many people every single day break the law? They're just not caught breaking the law.
Yeah.
Right? They have a drink, they get in their car, they drive. That's breaking the law. You shouldn't do that. So again, we have a double standard society that thinks the one thing is okay over here, but it's not okay over here. I know that I sent you a journal that I just recently wrote, and it was making a comparison about the transgender community versus the veterans community. How is it that you expect that we have this amount of compassion for less than 1% of the population, right? That has a mental illness. Yet we have a group of veterans over here that's in the millions that are owed this. This is not a choice. This is injury they sustained at war, but yet we could care less about them.
That's a really good point.
This is chosen over here, right? Transgender, they choose a path, right? Over here in the veterans world, they don't choose it at all. And yet they sit and suffer in silence because they're not going to come out and go, I need help, because they were once that badass that they were, fighting in running X amount of miles at any given time, carrying an 80-pound rucksack, jumping halo jumps, doing all of these incredible things. And then all of a sudden they come back and they're looked as broken. We're just going to throw them aside, give them their benefits, leave them alone. But if they act up, we're going to send them to jail. And not only are we going to send them to jail, we're going to take away their benefits. It is the only industry that I know that if you're a bad boy or a bad girl, they take away something you earned. If you're a teacher and you get a DUI, you keep your benefits. If you've worked for any other organization or worked your lifelong career, 30 years, it's not affected if you go to jail or not. They punish our veterans. And that's why this advocacy for me is so big, because I want people to hear this voice of reason. They've lost that. Right. And another thing, Mike, that we live in a society that is extremely me driven. It used to be community driven, right? In the 90s, when our guys went to war, people were hanging American flags. You're seeing that again, patriotism, because of Mr. Trump. And you're seeing the yellow ribbons. I've always been patriotic. My uncle came back from war with a flag draped casket. So my mother, her entire life, always taught us patriotism. You honor these people when the American flag is flying, you respect it. When you hear the national anthem, you honor it. But guess what happened? We allow athletes to kneel during our national anthem. All patriotism is gone. Burning flags in our streets, wearing war flags, right? That reminds our veterans of wartime. All of those things is a lack of respect, but it's all about popularity. They scream at the top of their voices. We've seen this about me, 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 me. Social media, they want to be an influencer. They want X amount of followers. What does all that stem from? Because they really don't like who they are. Okay. So they have to go on this platform and say, this is not fair. We hate Donald Trump. We hate, whatever it is. Yet we have people over here that are really suffering, and they're suffering in silence. So again, when I compare that, when I wrote that article about transgender versus our VA, I have compassion for both of them because there's both a mental illness. Do you get it? But one was a choice, right? I'm going to take this path because I really don't like who I am and I'm confused. And then over here, it was injury from fighting for our country, wearing that flag, the sacrifices. Erick missed 9 Christmases and Thanksgivings. He missed those. So again, it's like we have to really look at the research on it and common sense. This is just common sense to me.
Common sense.
And then you cannot be explained any other way. This is just common sense. If you're going to feel sorry for this group of people over here, you should also feel sorry for our group of people over here, right?
Yeah.
All these subgroups. And so I think I shared with you that I just created an institute for research, and it's Combat Support Institute. And it's taking all of these things that are being used that are non-traditional methods, ayahuasca, even looking at THC, looking at, ibogaine, all of these things, stem cell research, and saying, what are the statistics showing, right? Versus big pharma, because big pharma does something completely different to the brain. Once you take that pill, it messes with the dopamine, and it takes a very long time for it to restore itself. Same thing with any other type of drug. Same thing with alcohol. That's why people cannot stop drinking alcohol, because the body craves it. Same thing with caffeine. Try quitting caffeine. You'll get the worst migraine of your life because your body is saying, I need, right? And you're going, I don't want it, but my body's having this physiological response to it. How do I get past this addiction? Because even caffeine is an addiction. So we have to observe that. We have to look. If we're taking a chemical that is synthetically created in a laboratory, that was FDA clinically trialed, and the trials have to post the side effects, which is what you see on a commercial. If you take this drug, you can get lymphoma, you can get liver disease. Who wants that? That's where those side effects come from. It's not the people that are on it now that are reporting back these side effects. It's clinical trials. How do they even make something like that legal? It's poison.
Mm.
And so then you have to take another drug to offset these symptoms, then another drug. The next thing you know, they're on 8 drugs. Erick said that when he got back, they tried to prescribe 8 different medications for him. Not just Adderall, right, which is meth, amphetamines. Antipsychotic, antidepressants. Wellbutrin is the worst. I just started investigating Wellbutrin when I was on the Hill, and I was talking to all the people who were speaking on behalf of their experiences with Wellbutrin, and it should never be prescribed to any type of combat soldier who's experienced PTSD, who has PTSD, or any other injury, because it does something completely different to the brain. Wellbutrin is not going to tell you, their manufacturer is not going to tell you what the side effects are, because it's about money for them, right? Big pharma, it's the that's the problem. And so they don't care. They don't want to give the proper results. But some of the companies, or some of these nonprofit companies, are coming in now, going to these families where a soldier or a veteran has committed suicide, and they're like, what were they taking? Right? They're going to the families now, and they're interviewing them, saying, what were they taking? Number one is Wellbutrin. 182,000 men and women have committed suicide. They won't report those numbers, but that's what Trump's getting now, right? He's saying it's no longer 22 a day. It's 44 a day. So again, you were asking my experiences. Erick doesn't trust anybody, right? Of course he doesn't. That's just part of what being a Green Beret was about too, right? You were taught you don't trust anybody, right? You're trying to get intel because they're going to lie to you. It's not, he deliberately wants to live his life that way, but he comes to a society he doesn't trust at all. So he's going to use that same, I'm not going to take your pills. I'm not going to do this. You're out to get me. You want to put me in this hole. You want me to die. You want me to just to rot away. You want me to put a bullet in my head, all of these things, because he doesn't understand that he came back to a country that does not care about our veterans. It was a 20-year war. There are people that are sitting at the VA right now that are 20 years old. They don't remember 9/11. They have no idea what it's about, but they're supposed to treat you. For example, in my book, I write about the hotline, right? The suicide hotline.
What's the name of the book?
It's called A Soldier's Soldier.
Okay. I'll link
Right.
that. It's available online, I assume?
It is.
Okay,
it
I'll
is,
put
and
it in the links below as well.
Thank you. So I talk about our experience with the VA and documented it well. I remember on a Friday night, I looked at Erick's phone records and saw that he had called that hotline,
Like the suicide hotline.
because I called it, right? I'm like, why is he calling this 800
Yeah.
number? One was 57 minutes. One was 40 something minutes. One was 17 minutes. So I call and I go, oh my God. I'm freaking out now. And this young girl answers the phone. And so I know I was wasting resources, but in a way I had to understand this
You were
myself.
investigating.
I was investigating it for sure.
For your husband, yeah.
For my husband. And so I'm in the middle of writing this book as well. And I'm like, well, I've got to understand this. I've got to understand this. So I call and I go, yeah, I'm suicidal, whatever. She sounds so young. So I've got her to where she's no longer on this mission of trying to talk me off the ledge. But I'm like, you sound so young. What school did you go to? Because my degree is from blah, blah, blah. I have a psychology degree. I went to USF, just trying to get her to talk, trying to understand. And she says, oh, no, I didn't go to college. We just have a certificate. I said, excuse me? She goes, yeah, we just have a certificate. We're just trained. I said, so you have no idea what the guys that are calling you have really gone through.
No context.
Nothing,
Mm-hmm.
but yet you're quote unquote qualified to sit on the other end of this phone. And usually these guys, this is a last resource, right? They're not going to pick up the phone. They're just going to go do it, right? A lot of times they're not going to call just to have somebody to talk to. But, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. They're going to call a buddy. They're going to pick up the phone and go, dude, I'm really having a hard time. I just couldn't believe it. And so I wrote about it. Here's what she says to me at the end of the call. We don't have anybody to talk to you right this minute, but let me give you a number to call back Monday. This is a Friday night. A Friday night.
Are they closed on the weekends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally was lost. When I say lost for words,
Yeah.
my jaw was on the ground. I'm
Can't
still
believe it.
lifting
This
my
is
jaw up
America.
going, this is not what I just received on the other end of this call. It just wasn't.
This is America, and this is how they treat their veterans.
Yeah. And I'm like, I have to talk about this. I have to talk about what they're doing and how they're putting these people in there, right? This is our tax dollars. We are supposed to make sure that qualified people are in there. And if I had it my way, and if I had the opportunity to sit in front of Mr. Trump, this is exactly what I would say. Dismantle the VA. Do away with it.
Start over.
Okay? And if we really want to talk about something that made sense, when Obama came out with Obamacare, right? Think about that for a second. Everybody should get equal care for health care. Give it to our veterans because we're not giving it to them. It's double-sided. Every time I look at something, I'm like, this is double-sided. You wanted Obamacare to where everyone had equal access to health care. Give it to our veterans. They're getting the worst of the worst.
The worst.
These are incompetent doctors that are working for the government.
Bottom of the barrel.
Bottom. Probably graduated the lowest in their class of med school. I don't know how they made it. Because I've sat and talked to them myself and I'm like, where did you even get your degree from? And so dismantle the entire VA system and take those hospitals that are sitting there and put regular doctors in there to address all citizens.
Yeah. Or privatize the entire package and let veterans like me and Eric get care where,
Qualified.
I got a recommendation or referral for a stem implant in my spine. 2 weeks, I got the recommendation and they were ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then VA denied because they said they wouldn't pay for it because they have their own program. Then I said, okay, well, I'm getting this because I had an emergency room visit and 2 back-to-back lower back surgeries, 3 total.
Yep.
And they said, well, we'll get your referral. We'll get you in line. So I go to my first referral after waiting 2 months. And the doctor, the PA tells me, this is a chronic pain clinic, but I can give you a referral for surgery. And I said, what? I said, I'm here for a referral for a stem implant. And he goes, oh, we were tracking your upper spine. I said, no, this is lower spine.
Yeah.
I've had 6 phone calls and consults This is for my lower back. This is a stem implant for my lower back. And he goes, well, we'll have to start over.
Mhm.
And I said, when's the next appointment? 6 months. And then I said, okay, listen, when am I going to get an actual surgery? If I'm going to do lower back disc replacement to address this pain, how far are we out? He goes, years. He said, it's over a year, less than 2.
Mhm.
So between 1 and 2 years
Mhm.
for something that's an emergency.
Yep.
You take that and you compound mental health crisis, mental health issues. And it's like the difference between a person or a soldier or a Green Beret killing himself and not
Yep.
could be the referral or pushing them off and saying, hey, we'll get to you when we get to you.
Yeah. Mike, Eric was just in an accident in February, and it was a snowstorm. You know how it snows up here, right? And he was going to get his airplane in Indiana, and it was snowing really bad. And he's driving, and this semi truck comes by and knocks him off the road. And he's doing everything he can to hold the truck on the road, right? He's got the trailer behind him. He ends up tearing his bicep because he was holding, and they say, you can tear your bicep without strain.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
It can just
yeah.
pop. And it popped away from his elbow, and it was all the way up in his shoulder.
Rolled up
They
into
had
his
to get it.
shoulder. Yeah.
He goes to the doctor over here at Intermountain, and he meets with Dr. Hatch. He was in surgery the next day.
Yeah. Oh, they're
Guess
good
what?
up here.
Because you know what? It wasn't under VA.
Yeah.
It was under auto.
Yeah.
It
They would have
fell under-
denied it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, if nothing else, just like I said a few minutes ago when I was making the comparison, if you have one group of people that you're saying show sympathy to and blah, 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 why not do it across the board? If you're going to talk good health care, okay, Obama put a plan out saying Obamacare. If we're going to do that, then why don't we do the same thing with our veterans?
Yeah.
Do you see? So it makes no sense to me. Don't preach all of this stuff that we want equality across the board, but we're going to exclude one group of people, and that is our veterans. That's our veterans. So if they dismantled that entire VA system, the government's still going to pay your benefits, but why not walk into there and you have legitimate, competent
It should be the
people,
best healthcare.
the best ever.
Tier 1 healthcare.
Yes.
Being an example
Yes.
for all other industries in health.
Yeah.
Because we're doing comprehensive care.
Yeah.
We're doing MRIs. We're doing health and wellness. We're doing chiropractor appointments.
Yeah.
Like I have 40% hearing loss in my left ear, and I couldn't get a hearing aid. Then I tried to get my teeth done because I just had to get dental work, and they said at the time they didn't do dental. Now they supposedly do dental, but you got to get in line.
Yep.
So it's such a broken system. We're going to end this episode now, but we're going to do part 2 of this. And then part 2, we're going to talk more about your book and then some of the legal hurdles that you ran into. Also, the significant and impactful story you told me last night about the Salt Lake City behavioral health and how they were treating your husband.
Yep.
And particularly the counselor that specifically was pushing her ideology on your husband. And we'll get into the meat and potatoes of that. I don't care how many parts we do. We're trying to keep these around 40, 50 minutes for you guys. So get you on the daily commute. But I will link your book down below. Also your website, right? You started a website. What's the website about? What's the goal of the website?
The goal of the website is for information, right? And it's to also publish the research, true research, right? To write those articles to enlighten people about the different options that they have, because a lot of times they don't hear about them. So talking, for example, some are meat and potatoes of what Eric went through, like operator syndrome, right? I really address that heavily, and I talk about that on the book. In my book, also, I talk about Dr. Frew and his discovering of this, and how guys like yourself and Eric, your adrenal system, just everything is shot, from war, burnout. But also it talks about the benefits of meditation. It talks about the benefits of red light therapy. It talks about the benefits of hyperbaric chambers. All of these things. So every 2 weeks, I'm doing an actual journal, like a journal type, with research based, supporting documentation, not just my opinion, to help people. So you can just click on it. You can read the article. They're short, but it's informative. And also to give the resources. So when a combat veteran or their caregiver goes on this site and says, hey, what are they offering here? Oh, did you know about this, honey? Why don't we look at this? And we're also trying to include all of these nonprofit like Green Beret Foundation, Wounded Warriors, so that they have a link So if they're unfamiliar with these, but I need the Marines, I need Air Force, I need all of these programs so that someone has it at their fingertips, that they can go and find the resources like the stem cell that Erick just did recently for the TBI. But all these other different elements that are here to help our veterans. It's just free information that they're getting. But also, I've had folks come to me asking me if we would step it up to have people come through so we can do recommendations. Come to us and say, "Hey, we're struggling with this. What can we do?" To give them my experience, because I've dealt with it. I've dealt with the Green Beret Foundation. I've dealt with Wounded Warriors
For
Project.
years.
Yeah, for years and years
Yeah.
and years. So I'm actually flying to Atlanta Friday to work with Wounded Warriors for the brain education.
Oh, awesome.
The actual group of folks that I went through the old Chile, I talk about that on my website as well. They called me back and they said, "Neysa, you have so much experience with this. Please come in. We want you to be a part of this because we're trying to get our movement into that. It's natural healing is what it is."
Yeah.
And they want to go away from pharma. How does someone just really take control? And I'll end on this real quick. I met with one of the veterans that was in the video when I went to the Hill and was working with her on some of these exercises, right, to calm her down. And she's like, "Oh, I just need to go talk to my therapist." And I'm like, "But what do you do when you don't have a therapist?" Right? You start tapping on your dungeon, which is 2 inches below your belly button. You start get out of your mind, go to your gut.
Is
right?
that EFT therapy? A form of it?
It's kind of, right? But it's the mental part, right? It's just taking your head from being here.
Yeah.
And then you go, let me go to something different, right? I want to divert where my mind is right this minute. If you're in a traffic jam and you're feeling anxious.
You need tactics for
you
immediate
need
action.
Something right now, a toolbox, right? You need that toolbox you can open up and say, "I need this tool right this minute." And that's what we're trying to do on the Combat Support Institute. So we're trying to provide actual research, to share with other people, caregivers, families, even working with Gold Star families to say, "How can we help you?" We're trying to promote retreats to bring people in on a 3-day, weekend here in beautiful Utah to say, let's take the guy that served and he's incapacitated or he's in a wheelchair and let's put him in a side-by-side and drive him through the mountains so he can actually get outdoor therapy with guys that he misses because he's lost his identity too when he was in this, accident, right? He no longer feels like he's a man or feels like he's part of this going on, right? It bothers the psyche. And then how do you take the wife who every day she's tending to her husband, right? How do we refresh her? How do we give her something? She says, "I feel really good. How do I, at night when I put him to bed and I feel just exhausted, how do I go in here and meditate for 5 minutes just so I can release all of that stress that I've gone through today, fighting with the VA, going to hospitals, going, trying to get my husband cared for, or my wife, because, there's difference, but that's where we're at. We just want to promote it to where it's offering like a holistic approach to healing. And I talk about that in the book, but I've decided to open up that business part of it and dedicate my life to that, to share with people, to speak on behalf of what Erick's been through and then what we have found works, and what doesn't work. So
I'll link that down below as well. I appreciate you coming in, and then we'll do part 2 really soon when you get back from Atlanta.
Okay.
I'd like to hear about that story about your experiences in Atlanta too, dealing with that institute, because I personally have some motivations, and it'd be good to share that with everybody as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast. It's hard hearing her tell that story because it's so difficult to imagine what these veterans are going through. If you want to make change, if you want to help, what you could do is contact your local congressional and Senate representatives in your state. And I'll even put the points of contact for the President of the United States, for the White House, so you can make those complaints. It's valid, not just for veterans, but from anybody suffering from mental health crisis in our country. I appreciate you guys. Till next time. Peace.